We will now proceed to the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty.
To fully form an opinion, one should always see the full picture, and even more so when it comes to political conflicts. If there is a motto or a rule that's religiously followed by politicians, is that ends justify means. Thus, in politics, there is no good in evil. If we can dispassionately look at all the elements of any political conflict, we'll see that it's never about right and wrong, or good and evil. It's always about profits and jurisdictions. Now, does that mean that this video would try to justify Putin's invasion to Ukraine? Well, no. But there is another side of the coin. The side that we'll never see in the Western media. The side that tells the Russians' point of view and how they feel they were forced into this war by NATO.
По поводу, хотим мы этого или нет? Конечно, нет. Именно поэтому мы и выдвинули предложение о переговорном процессе, результатом которого должна быть договоренность об обеспечении равной безопасности всех, включая нашу страну.
First, what is NATO? North Atlantic Treaty Organization is a security alliance between North America and several Western European nations, formed after the Second World War in 1949. The main goals of this alliance, as declared by NATO, is to deter Soviet expansion, forbid the revival of nationalist militarism in Europe, and to encourage the European political integration. Or more precisely, NATO is an anti-Soviet military superpower formed to fight against any future aggression by the Soviet Union. Naturally, Russia saw this alliance as a threat to its national security and countered by forming what was called the Warsaw Pact, a defense treaty signed in 1955 between the Soviet Union and 7 other Eastern European countries: Albania, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Eastern Germany. The goal of this treaty was similar to that of NATO. If one member was attacked, all others would defend it. After the collapse of the Berlin Wall in 1968 and the disintegration of the Soviet Union, a question arose: should Germany, now that it became one nation again, join the NATO, or follow its eastern half and join the Warsaw Pact? As a solution to this problem, the US President at the time, George H.W., made an offer to the Russian President Mikhail Gorbachev. The offer was, if Germany became a NATO member, NATO would stop expanding, not 1 inch eastward, in the word of the US Secretary of State, James Baker. At this point, after the Cold War ended, Russia was at its weakest and had no choice but to believe the Americans' offer, and indeed they kept their side of the agreement and dissolved the Warsaw Pact. However, NATO didn't. They kept the membership door open. NATO started out with only 12 founding members, joining the original signatory between 1952 and 1982 were Greece, Turkey, Germany and Spain. Still, it didn't stop there. In 1999, NATO went against its promise to Russia and moved eastward. Slovakia, Slovenia and Albania joined.
As America formally declares its support for Albania and Croatia's entry into NATO.
Between 2004 and 2009, and in spite of the Russians' protests and warnings, 7 other Eastern European nations joined NATO. Some of them were former Soviet members' republics, and the most recent members are Montenegro and North Macedonia.
Today we proudly welcome Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia. We welcome them into the ranks of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Yet, NATO shows no attention of slowing its expansion, especially in Russia's security zone. In 2021, NATO officially recognized Bosnia, Georgia and Ukraine as future NATO members, while also in talks with Finland, Serbia and Sweden. Back in February 2007, Putin delivered what it appears to be his last friendly warning. Putin addressed the annual Munich Security Conference stating, "It turns out that NATO has put its frontline forces on our borders, and we continue to strictly fulfill the treaty obligations and do not react to these actions at all. I think it's obvious that NATO's expansion does not have any relation with the modernization of the alliance itself, or with ensuring security in Europe. On the contrary, it represents a serious provocation that reduces the level of mutual trust, and we have the right to ask, against whom is this expansion intended? Then he proceeded to say, I would like to quote the speech of NATO General Mr. Warner in Brussels. He said at the time, the fact that we are ready not to place a NATO army outside of Germany territory gives the Soviet Union a firm security guarantee. Where are these guarantees? NATO's expansion towards Russia was always recognized as a dangerous behavior on the global security, not only by the Russians but also well-reputed American political figures as well. Sir Talbot, former Deputy of State, said, many Russians see NATO as a vestige of the Cold War. They point out that they have disbanded the Warsaw Pact and ask why the West shouldn't do the same. George Cannon, American diplomat and historian, said when he was asked about NATO's expansion, I think the Russians would gradually react quite adversely and it will affect their policies. I think it's a tragic mistake. There was no reason for this whatsoever. No one was threatening anybody else. William G. Burns, former US ambassador to Russia, said, Ukraine entry to NATO is the brightest of all red lines for the Russians elite. From knuckle-draggers in the dark recesses of the Kremlin to Putin's sharpest liberal critics, I have yet to find anyone who views Ukraine in NATO as anything other than a direct challenge to Russians' interests. In conclusion, this is the Russians' point of view of this war. They believe they were stabbed in the back by NATO. They point out that they were the tolerant side of this conflict over the years, and that their tolerance in diplomatic efforts never seemed to achieve any progress with the other side of the conflict. They see that they're being surrounded by an anti-Russian military superpower. The Russians say they're only acting in self-defense, and that they can never wait till NATO places its missiles on their borders.